Do you know what this is? No, it's not a brick. It's a whole grain bread. In Germany we call it Schwarzbrot. Some people think this is pumpernickel, but pumpernickel is a little bit different. It is baked with steam, while this is sort of dried, baked, and then dried again. It's a very delicious and very healthy food, a very healthy bread. I show you the steps how to bake it. It's a little bit of a journey. It's not difficult. It just takes like a very long time to finish it. You start your whole grain bread the night before you want to bake it. You have to make a pre-dough first, and for that I use a 7-grain cracked grain mix. You can use any other cracked grain mix that you like. I like this one, and they're different on the market, so I'll put a link under this video for what I can recommend from my experience, and then you can see if that's what you want to buy, or maybe you get something at your local store. So I measure a kilogram of these grains, and yes, this is quite a lot, and I've used my largest bowl. This will be like about 3 breads, and I bake them all at once, and then I freeze them. First I slice them and then I freeze them, and this way I can just take the slices that I need every time I want to have my Schwarzbrot, and yeah, that works very well for me. So also I use 200 grams of rye flour, a little more, almost there, just a little bit. Here we go. And then I add 5 cups or 1200 milliliters of cold water. It's a lot of water, I know. Okay. So now I use my sourdough, and if you want to learn how to make a sourdough at the first place, please watch my rye bread video. I've explained it there, and that's something you have to do in 3 days. But once you've made your sourdough, you can reuse it over and over again. And just right now, I will be using 150 grams of it. So I measure this on my scale here. You can't see it because the bowl is so large. And okay, here we go. And since I will not take any dough from this dough to feed back my my sourdough, I have to feed it before I put it back into the fridge. So let me take this from the scale down here, and now I stir this all together, and I let it stand overnight until tomorrow, when I will continue with this dough and add even more ingredients. So that's why I have this really huge bowl, and it's really fun to bake this bread. I really like doing it. It's, yeah, something I like to do, and I like the bread very much. My kids don't like it, they're not used to it enough. I grew up with it, and I really like the taste, but I also like the health benefits of it. Okay, so let me put this aside. I will cover it and place it in a warm space, but since I've now lost 150 grams of my sourdough, I have to feed some back to it. So yeah, I will probably better do it in a bowl. So this is what I still have. Let me see how much this is. Yeah, that's about 100 grams. So I will feed it, since I lost 150 gram, I will feed it flour, just regular flour, and add 75 gram of this flour. Oh, a little bit too much. Okay, that would be fine. And also 70 milliliters of water. Oh, 70 gram, 70 milliliters, 70 gram, it's the same thing. Okay, now I stir this, and then I will put it back into the jar and have it at a warm place overnight until tomorrow, and then I will put it just back into the fridge until next time when I need some sourdough. And that's how easy sourdough is made. It's really not rocket science. It's quite simple. It's just bread and water and the bacteria from the air. Okay, don't want to have any lumps, so I'll try to get them out. Okay, and that's the whole trick for today. And how I continue with my bread, I will show you in the next scene. So yesterday I soaked these grains in water, and I had covered it and let it just stand there for 24 hours. And as you can see, there is it's a very mashy thing now. It's very well soaked, and it smells very sour. You can really smell the sourdough, and you also can see there's a lot of air in there. So the sourdough really did its magic here. So an hour ago I used these flax seeds, and I put 400 milliliter of boiling water on top of them, and you see it has become quite some mass, and it's like a pudding a little bit. And I add this directly to my grains. I don't remove any water or anything, so I just put it in here. And it's important to soak these flax seeds, because flax seeds are very good for your digestion, but if it's too dry, it will soak the water out of the digestive area, and it will cause obstipation instead of what we usually want when we use flaxseed. So I mix this in a little bit, and then I will add my next ingredients. And now you can already get an idea why I'm using this really huge bowl. And if you're not sure if you want a lot of this bread and you've probably never tried it before, you can just use half of everything from this recipe. But if you know that is something you really like, if you like the wholegrain bread from Germany, it makes sense to make really a big amount of this dough and bake a lot of bread at once, because it's very time consuming. It will, before it's really getting out of the oven, it will be in the oven for 5 hours, which is a very long time. And I really urge you to have a good timing, because the first time I made it, I was making it in the afternoon, or started in the afternoon, and then I had to let it rise, and then I had it to dry, and then I had it to bake, and then it had to cool, and so it basically went until midnight, and we were very tired. It was a work night, and yeah, so I recommend starting this whole thing in the morning, so you don't have any issues with that in the evening. Okay, so now my other ingredients that I add is just regular flour, and you will find the amounts and the details for this recipe in my blog. And I also add some This is einkorn flour. You can also use some spelt flour. And if you have neither, you can just use regular flour. It's okay. It's not a problem. Okay. So I also add sunflower seeds, and I didn't have enough sunflower seeds, so that's why I added just some of my pumpkin seeds. Both is okay. I just basically want something to chew on a little bit in this dough. All right. Wow. It seems a little dry, but I think when I'm kneading it with my hands, it should become a little better. Otherwise, I will have to add a little more water. So my other ingredients, here is some fresh yeast, and I will add some water to it and break it apart. And this is 21 grams of fresh yeast. If you don't have fresh yeast, you can use 3 little bags of the dry yeast instead. And it doesn't seem to be a lot of yeast for such a big amount of flour. However, this is a bread that's not rising the way that other breads rise, and it's a lot more dense. It has almost no yeast taste when it's finished, so it's all a little bit different. Okay. What else? I also need a tablespoon or 2 of this molasses. I forgot to put the spoon here, so I would just put some in here. Some people use more molasses, and I don't use too much of it. I don't like the taste very much. If you want it to taste a little more bitter, you can use more of the molasses, but last time I couldn't resist and was like licking my finger with a little of the molasses, and I didn't get that taste out of my mouth for like 2 days. It was awful. So I did not like that at all. Before I add the salt, I give it a little more of a mix. And I think I'm not getting around adding some more water. This is something, it is hard to predict how much water you need because the grains always soak differently well, and here in this case it seems that I have taken on most of the water, so I will just give it some more. And so I also need to add 12 grams of bread spice, and bread spice is something we can buy in Germany pretty easy. I think you can even get it on Amazon. It might not be the exact same spice mix that we use in Germany. If you want it like in Germany, there's a recipe for the bread spice on my blog, and I will put a link under this video so you can check that out. It's not too difficult to make. Okay, and I will soon have to mix it with my hands. So it's very difficult to get through here, but I want, before I mix the salt to it, I wanted to get a little more mixed with the yeast, because as we know, the salt is not good for the yeast. but it's good for the taste. So they shouldn't really touch each other at the first place. Okay, a little more water. There's still lots of flour down there. I'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, it really needs some elbow grease here. Okay, so now I add the salt, 80 grams. It sounds like a lot, but you will miss it if you use less. Okay, now I'll get a little more water. Okay, I will switch to using hands. I have prepared 2 of these baking pans for bread, and I've prepared them with a little bit of oil. Although these silicone thingies don't really need that, but I want to be on the safe side here. Now I put this all in here, but not all the way up to the rim, because it is supposed to rise and probably double its size. So I press it in a little bit like this. Okay, and oops, the other one. I probably need my 3rd pan that I have here already, but I think you get the idea of this, and I'll show you my next step in a minute. Yeah, so I filled my baking pans, and you see it's really a lot of dough. I can make a lot of bread from that, and I have to let it proof now, but before I do that I put some water on all of these doughs so they do not dry out during the proofing process. And the proofing is supposed to take as long as it takes until it has doubled its size. I have to admit, in the past I never got to that point. It never really doubled its size. It was like maybe 1/3 more than previously, and it still worked out to be a very great and tasteful and good bread, so I didn't miss anything. It's not like I thought, I wish it had raised a little more. It's good enough the way it worked out the last times. Okay. Oh. All right. I will cover it using my baker's fabric and let it rest, and then I will continue when I think that my dough has proofed enough to go to the next step. All right, let's take a look at my dough, and it has increased in its volume clearly, but it's not like it has doubled it, and that's okay. And so in my next step I want it to be in the oven for 1.5 hours, And so in order not to dry out, I will again cover it with some water. And then it goes into the oven at 170 degrees. That's the lowest my oven can do. It originally should be 122 degrees, but since that's not such a big difference in Celsius, it's not a big deal. Okay, so I put this in the oven now. Let's see how that fits. So this will stay in the oven now for 1.5 hours, and then I will increase the temperature and show you how I continue to bake this bread. 90 minutes have passed, and I will increase the temperature of the oven to 300 degrees now and let it bake for 60 minutes. So 60 minutes have passed, and I will now reduce the heat to 200 degrees Fahrenheit and then let it be in there for another 2.5 hours, which is quite a long time. After the 2.5 hours, I will take the bread out and let it completely cool down, and then I will put it into a plastic bag and leave it there overnight. And what I do with my bread, I will show you at the end of this video my favorite recipes or my favorite things how to eat this bread, and I hope you stay tuned. I know it's a long process of baking this bread. It's totally worth it. Hang in there. So even though it's a lot of time that you have to spend, you can't really go anywhere. However, it is really a delicious bread, and since you make such a large amount of bread, you can just have it for a couple of weeks or even months, depending on how much you eat if you freeze it. Now, after this seemingly endless drying, baking, drying process, I could finally take my bread out of the oven, and I let it cool down completely, and I could actually eat it right now, but I want to slice it before I freeze it, and for that I want the crust to be soft, and that's why I will put this in a plastic bag for the next 24 hours. And yeah, I will have to cut my bread though in order to fit into that bag. And let me see. So I have these silicone bags that I like very much. I can reuse them, so less plastic. Now I can just put it in here, and I can even freeze it in there later, but as I said, I want to slice it so I can portion it a little better when I am taking some of the bread out. This side. Okay. Now this video doesn't end here, because I want to show you how I like my whole grain bread the most. So here are my favorite ways to eat Schwarzbrot or whole grain bread. First of all, I want to show you how it looks if you slice it. So you can see the grains in here, some of the pumpkin seeds. So it has become quite soft, but still chewable thing. And the interesting thing is, if you eat this Schwarzbrot, the longer you chew it, the sweeter it tastes. And you should really try that and just chew it for like a minute and see what happens in your mouth. It's very interesting, very delicious too. And so one of the ways I like my Schwarzbrot is just with some butter. That is actually something I really, really like. And then I really chew it for long to have this great taste of sweetness that comes out of this bread. So this would be one way to eat it, with cold, delicious butter, and it's whatever you prefer. salted butter or sweet butter. Either way it's good. So another way I like to eat my Schwarzbrot is with salami. That is a very delicious combination too. I eat that a lot too. Then what happened when my kids started school and I had to make them some, well, here it is lunch, but in Germany it's breakfast. So in Germany the kids stay at school only until 1 p.m. They don't have lunch at school, they have a breakfast break. Actually they have 2 breaks that are they're both 15 minutes long, and in that time the kids can eat something. And so in order to have something healthy, I wanted to give them a Schwarzbrot, but Schwarzbrot is not particularly popular at kids. And so we had a compromise. We're good at compromises here. And the compromise was they have the delicious, healthy Schwarzbrot, which they didn't like. And on top of that, they got some Nutella. And you wouldn't believe how delicious that is. That is a great combination that I also really like and enjoy. So that's kind of the breakfast part. However, there's one thing that I love above all these, and of course you can eat this bread with cheese, that's very delicious too, but my absolute all-time favorite, I think since my childhood, is actually, wait for it, just 1 second, we'll be right back. So this is my favorite, just putting a fried egg on top and eat that for dinner. That is actually a dinner that I enjoy quite often. If I don't feel like this or that, I'd say, I think I just have a fried egg on some bread. And my husband's kind of making fun of it, but I really like this very simple approach to my dinner, and it fills me, it's good, it's healthy, it's all I want sometimes. And I hope you try these variations and try this bread. It's really worth doing it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button. That will really help me to spread the word about my channel. And I hope I see you back with my next video.